Hi, my name is Jeremy Smith. I'm the founder and president of Launchpad. We're a full service brokerage and consulting firm that works with food and beverage brands to help them get into Costco. That's the only retailer we work with. Can't answer any of your questions on Whole Foods or anybody else. I don't know anything about their businesses other than from a consumer perspective, as I shop there. But Costco, I do know a bit about, been selling them for 26 years and really enjoy it.
Excellent. I first and foremost, I wanted to speak to you because I am very inspired and infatuated with your business model, and I love what you're doing and how focused you are into the Costco area. And so, talk a little bit about, just to start it off, kind of how you chose that path, and then what has been the positives and benefits of staying on that path of strictly with one retail chain like that.
Well, I got into this business 26 years ago because my brother left Costco. He had worked for them for 17 years and was starting a brokerage firm. And I had been in the advertising and design business world for 22 years. And, was just looking for something different. And I loved working with my brother. And so decided to go work for him. And he then had a falling out with his partner at his brokerage firm. And we started a company called Level One, which we then went on to sell to Advantage Sales and Marketing. And then in 2017, I started Launchpad. And the reason we focus on Costco is, first of all, the volumes there. I was really surprised one time I was working, advising a client that was working with Albertsons, and they were going into 2,000 stores. And I thought that would be like a $2 or $3 million purchase order. And it was a really small order. And I couldn't believe that. I said, if this would be like a $4 million order at Costco. And so I just like the pace of Costco. You don't have to wait till like once a year when a grocer does their review and their resets. Costco's resetting all the time. So while it's not easy to get into and the thresholds are very high from a sales perspective, if you do hit it right in the days like with Chobani and Crave Jerky and Pop Chips, you can build a huge business at Costco. So I like it. It's I didn't know I was going to like it when I went into the business, but enjoyed it very much, and probably retire sometime this year.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's when you and your brother started out. So did you worked? You said you worked directly with Costco for a while before you switched over to what your role now?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I learned the business, was working for my brother at a company called Level One Marketing, which he owned, and began to learn how, Costco is a very different sales proposition. You hear these stories of long-term relationships with buyers at grocery stores and going skiing or on trips and all different experiences. And Costco's really, they don't do that. They're not allowed to go on trips with vendors. They're they run a real tight ship, and integrity is very important to them. And so it's a good company. I have a lot of integrity. They have a lot of integrity. And as I said earlier, the volumes are there. So, I had a client earlier in the year that they're probably doing about 5-6 million a year. And nationally, and as they're building their new brand. And we got an opening order for like 500,000 from Costco. And he was, the founder was blown away. He couldn't believe how large the order was. He was used to these small orders that go through the distributor and then on to the retailer. And so he was all excited about Costco.
When you can we talk a little bit about how for anybody in let's say we're speaking right now to food and beverage entrepreneurs that either have an established brand or they're creating a brand. Let's talk a little bit about the consumer experience in a box member store versus a general retail.
Well, one of the things that always intrigued me about Costco was that you don't see at a supermarket is that there's excitement about going and shopping and the experience at Costco. Members love the demos and they like interacting with the demo people. And, you can, like when you go to the supermarket, your kid might be grumpy that morning. But generally when they go to Costco, it's different because they know they're going to be able to taste some product and experience something new. It's still the only retailer other than Apple that has lines at their door in the morning for people waiting to get in. And, there's something to be said about the success of building a business like that, where you create that type of excitement. You hear people talk about like going to Safeway, and I'm not knocking Safeway, but, just it's more of a drudge experience going to the supermarket than it is going to Costco, because you don't know what new items are going to be there. And so, you're going to experience something different than you would at the supermarket.
Is that what, and I don't expect you to know the answer right off the bat, but is there a method to a percentage of new rotations that they do per week and month, or is it really they're just trying to keep up with the consumer demand, not letting that drive the planograms?
No, Costco, they don't generally go over 4,200 to 4,300 SKUs. So that's what really drives the business. So you've got probably 80% of the SKUs that are there every day. And then you've got 20% that are on rotation or new. And so it's just a little bit different than a traditional supermarket where, if you hit the numbers at a supermarket, you could be there till the end of time as long as you pay your slotting fees. And at Costco, you could be highly successful, meet all or exceed all the numbers and still get your item removed, because Costco, I hate to use the word panic, but because it's probably the wrong adjective to use, but they like to create that feeling for the member that if you don't buy it today, it may not be here tomorrow. And that in itself is something that's very different than any other retailer.
When Costco also with there being the differentials. I mean, I love recently seeing their reach out to Gen Z and things like that with the merchandise and getting the clothing out there. Kind of talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in your evolution with Costco and how they've kind of continually been on the front end of connecting with their consumers and their guests.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story, and because it really, to me, exemplifies what makes Costco so different. Many years ago, we had a client, two male models. They were kind of like the Tom Brady great looking guys, and all the female buyers wanted to meet with the brand. They had a granola business, and the item just didn't sell. We did road shows, and no matter how nice the guys were, you can't, if the dog, as I think it was Ross Perot who said, that dog won't hunt. And when you have a dog that won't hunt, there's not a lot you can do about it. It just becomes a good family pet. And so the item didn't sell. We did road shows to test the item first. But one member in the Texas region called Jim Sinegal, who used to be one of the founders and used to be this CEO, and said, "I love this granola. Can you bring it back in?" And Jim Sinegal called the buyer in Texas and said, "Hey, I want you to bring this item in." Now, who does that for one member? It's like, if an item gets discontinued, most retailers would say, "Sorry, you have to go buy it somewhere else." So I got the call from the buyer saying, telling me the story. And he said, "Yeah, Jim wants us to bring it in." And I said, "But it's not going to sell." And he goes, I know, but it's Jim. And, the member asked for it, and whatever the members want, that's what we're going to do. And so it died like a painfully slow death, but they brought it in, and the Costco member was very happy. And, that's highly unusual in this type of business, that any retailer would go out and do something just for one member, but that's Costco. And, they've always had that relationship where a member can call the CEO of the company and talk to them about, what's going on. And there's been many trips I've taken up to the corporate office where I've seen Jim Sinegal come out, and he'll eat his lunch in the lobby and talk to vendors right there. And he doesn't make any deals, of course, that wouldn't work. But he talks to them about Costco and their item and shows them a lot of respect. And I think he was so hands-on. And then when Greg Jelnick came in and took over, it was that same sort of culture where, CEOs at Costco, the CEO of Costco does not sit in his office all day. He gets out on the road and goes into every warehouse. And it's a different environment. And that's why through good times and bad times, Costco's always been successful, is because they really listen to their members, and they're committed to the highest quality experience for their members.
I'm saying this jokingly, but it is serious, that my parents go to the Winchester, Virginia location, and now that you just on the record said that they'll do anything for one person, I think he's going to file a complaint later today that he wants more tasting tables throughout the warehouse. So
Well, actually, that's something that you can actually go to the warehouse manager or the merchandise manager, and sometimes they'll do that for you. So, it's just a question of, how many items are being demoed at a time, and do they have enough people doing demos, and all that other stuff. So, but that's another part of their business that's always been unique to them, is that there's nothing like a Costco demo. I've seen the ones at Whole Foods, and they're okay, but you don't have, the volume of people, 5,000 to 10,000 people going into a Costco warehouse and crowding around the tables and, patiently waiting for the hot samples to be cooked.
Yeah, it's growing up where they live and going there and stuff like that. It's just always a joy. And I look back, and I live in York, Pennsylvania, and I'm like just far enough away from one that we have some of the competitors around here, and we're always championing to get one a little closer in York. But it's I want to walk through a little bit for you in the early stages of Launchpad. And I have a ton of questions, because of the world of members and club sales is so unique, and I find it fascinating. But for you in the early time of Launchpad, when you when you set your flag down and you were like, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to be the premier for Costco, connections in food and beverage and things like that, was that met with a huge reception positively, or did you face some challenges in the beginning when you established yourself?
Well, there's always the normal challenges that you have of starting a new business, and some brands that tell you they're going to go with you when you open up don't show up, and others do, and so old doors close and new ones open. But we were met with a lot of enthusiasm because our model's different. We're only representing brands that are trying to make the world a better place. One of the things that kind of upset me over the years is that we would help companies build a lot of wealth. And sometimes the products like, 5-Hour Energy weren't healthy for you. And I don't want to help companies that are making ultra processed foods a staple inside supermarkets. And so we have very strict policies on the type of company that we'll represent. And people were excited about that because we were outspoken about it. But the other thing that was unique about our launch was that if you go look at websites of other brokers, all they do is talk about themselves and what they've accomplished. Our website, the messaging is geared towards the founder, the entrepreneur, the Steve Jobs, if you will, of the world. And we definitely borrowed a lot from Apple in our copywriting and our messaging, which a lot of the copywriting I wrote at about 3 or 4 in the morning. I just got this idea, and that we would write it. Our website would convey the message that we're here for you and we understand you as an entrepreneur, not what I've done. I mean, most brands, you're not going to sign a broker to represent you that you don't think will bring you success. So there was, in our minds, we just showed photos of the brands we represent, and that expressed our success. But we talk a lot about chaos, and we have quotes from, I would say, more revolutionary and innovative people like Gloria Steinem and the actor Steve McQueen, who was considered a rebel, and then Truman Capote and a few other people, because we wanted to establish ourselves as a different voice in an all too we're just like blah, blah, blah world. So we wanted people to see that we stand out from the rest, and we were very successful doing that.
Yeah, it's what really drew me to your business over the years, and I've been following what you've been doing, and I never actually got, when my sales career, I got to chain and everything like that, but I didn't actually ever sell into members and club services. So our paths never crossed when I was representing any clients. But what I loved about your stance is, and your principled stance and the integrity you speak about, but also the embrace of the dreamers and the disruptors.
Yes.
And I think that you empowered so many people that while we are all dreamers and disruptors and we all do our own thing, there's a sense of reality that you have to hold on to when you're going through the placement and everything like that. How did you from an emotional intelligence standpoint work with these dreamers and these disruptors to keep them grounded and move them forward while also allowing them to be disruptors and dreamers?
That's a very good question. I've never been asked that before. Sometimes it was easy, and other times, no matter what I said, they just wouldn't listen, and many of those companies are out of business. Not that we have,
it doesn't matter what channel of sale, that's the same.
Exactly. So there's a fine balance, but you're not. Costco can be a very difficult place to deal with because their supply chain requirements are very strict, and again, when you're a company that's fighting for your members, and your members are your most important constituent, um, it you have a different attitude, and a low tolerance for failure. And when I mean failure, I mean not delivering on time, packaging failures, things like that. So we also try and slow things down, and make and have our clients take their time to really make sure they're ready. There's a big there's a big difference between the brands that are at 10 million plus and the ones that are at 1 to 8 million. A lot of them don't have, the smaller ones don't have CFOs. So some of their numbers that they come up with financially are more forecasts than actual numbers. And so Costco, like, you can afford to lose a few pennies going into Safeway, but Costco, if you lose a few pennies, you can go into hundreds of thousands of dollars because the volume's so great there. So you have to be really careful, and you have to make sure you do your homework. So, it's kind of like some entrepreneurs are very ADD-ish, and so you have to get their attention and get them to really listen. That yes, it'll be great if we do $1 million our first year, blah 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 blah, but that's not our. There's a lot more you have to do than just get your beautiful packaging in a larger size for Costco. It's making sure you really do have the supply chain. I can't tell you how many times people are like, oh yeah, our supply chain is perfect, it's this and that, and then first order is delayed, and so due to supply chain issues. And so we're very, after a while you have enough experience and you know how to deal with the different personalities, but we also do a much more thorough interview with our brands. Over the years, we learned that the most important criteria for success are the people, and whether or not the people leading the company have the ability to execute or not. Because I've seen plenty of great products over the years fail because the management team didn't have the discipline to go out and build the business properly. They were more scatterbrained and more, we'll do anything for everybody and we're all things to all people. And so there's when you line up on a blackboard, success on the left side, failure on the right side, the ways to fail it's a much longer list than success. And so, but it's important because too often brands get too founders get too confident in their abilities. And I always try and work with clients to say, okay, now that scenario you just gave me is in the perfect world. Now, what if it doesn't work that way? Let's say sales are less. What are we going to do? So we try and workshop all those things through so that we're prepared before we go to Costco, so that we have all the answers in advance, and we can build momentum, because the key to a business is building momentum. It's probably, in my opinion, one of the least understood aspects to the business, and most companies overlook momentum, but I can smell when momentum is gone. And so at our own company, we're always sensing that and making sure that we're keeping the momentum going, which is why we have so many sales meetings with the team each week, so that we are on track, because there's a lot of distractions in life, and we want to keep everybody focused on the goals.
And that let's talk a little bit about. I guess we could choose one thing. Let's take maybe a 12-ounce can, for example. and using it as an example of for everybody to understand too, if you've not sold into or been placed into a club or a member store, sometimes you have to create a unique SKU, literally the entire packaging for those things, and adding to the forecasting financially and those things, knowing that if something went wrong, you might have a warehouse full of that SKU that might not transfer to other types of retail. So talk a little bit about how you walk through and deciding on, without giving away the secret sauce, kind of how do you choose, and then how do you kind of walk through that with somebody where you're like, hey, this 4-6 NR 12 pack is not going to, we need to increase it, or we need to restructure the entire physical product.
Well, that's a really good question, because there really is no secret sauce. Everyone thinks there is, but there isn't. So a lot of times brands come to us and they say, well, we'll figure out the pack size with the buyer. And that's a really poor way of doing business, because you've just said to yourself that whether you use a co-packer or whether you manufacture, that the buyer is going to be the one that determines what packs will be developed on your equipment. Now, let's say the buyer says, well, I want it in a 36 count, but the equipment that you have, that's not very efficient. A 28 pack would be much more efficient, which means you can create more value. And so the first thing we tell clients to do is to meet with their co-packer or their plant manager and focus on what pack we can start with to introduce the product and what's going to be efficient, and to think forward a couple of years. What if the item becomes successful at some point? Costco is going to want to upsize and get more value. What would be the next size that you have the potential to do? If you leave everything up to the buyer, they'll design everything for you, and they'll break your brand strategy. And we've always found that if we go in and are totally prepared for a buyer's meeting with a direction that we want to go, we still allow for some flexibility with the buyer to have inputs like, well, move this up here, move this, logo here, this call out should be there. And the buyer may have a reason that we need to be in a 36 count because they're trying to hit a certain ring. But we're not going to tell our client, go ahead and do whatever the buyer says, if we know financially it doesn't make sense. And sometimes clients are too willing to sell out to the buyer's wishes at the sake of hurting their profits, because sometimes you got to walk away from a deal to get a deal that you want. You can't always focus on what the buyer wants and what the buyer needs. Too often brands don't ask, what do I need? And the companies like a Chobani, the reason they're so successful is they do all the little things right, like saying, and they knew how to say no. So they would say no to Costco. No, there's no way we're going to do that. It's not efficient at our plant. And so then, and the buyer understands that if you've got a certain type of equipment and the buyer wants to use a certain paper cup, but it won't run efficiently at your plant, you can't do that just to get the order. You've got to do what's right for your man, because that's what happens all the time, where you have salespeople who hate manufacturing. And sorry about my dogs.
You're fine.
And you have manufacturing that hates sales because nobody listens to each other. The manufacturing says, well, this is what we need to do. Sales says, well, this is what I need to do to get it in. Well, you can't build a team at a company where manufacturing and sales are at each other's throat. they've got to be on equal footing together and working together to build the right platform for Costco. Otherwise, you shouldn't go to Costco, and it doesn't make sense. The other advantage to a larger size at Costco is you get channel separation. You know, you don't want to be in the same size or something close to the same pack size out in retail and at Costco. So you want to have some separation.
Yeah, and I think that's I just wanted to bring that up because I think a lot of people don't realize, and the question could have been a lot more complicated if we went even farther. I was thinking of the granola and all these other things. I mean, you could have a giant bag of granola that can't be placed anywhere else if it didn't work and things like that. So I think I appreciate the way you put that, and I want people to really understand that it's that where you're going with. I believe it's that survival versus strategy. You know what I mean? A lot of entrepreneurs come into it and they're in survival mode and they want to get the biggest thing so they can, you know, do what they need to do. They're not trying to be greedy. They're in survival mode. And I think that that versus when you can pause and slow down for a second and go into strategic mode. Obviously, the more successful route is the strategic mode than the survival mode.
Yeah, and the other thing is you always have to remember Costco is about dollar sales per week per warehouse. So, you know, they're really looking for a pallet to turn every 14 to 21 days. And so you can't come in with a packaging size that's so large and there's so many units on that it takes 30 to 60 days to just get through that pallet. So you know, it is quite complicated because you've got to hit the right velocities in order to be successful at Costco. And so you've got to take all of that into account when you're designing a pack size. And what a lot of brands don't understand is that sometimes something that does really well at Whole Foods, and I always bring up the example of kale chips. Kale chips is a much more niche category. And you think just because you're successful at Whole Foods in a small bag, that's going to translate well into a 22-ounce bag. And so I have my Super Bowl rule that I always use for snacks, which is, am I going to get excited about going over to my buddy's house on the Super Bowl day to eat a bag of kale chips or whatever the product happens to be? Most people aren't going to rush over to Rob's house to go through a 22-ounce bag of kale chips. And so the reality is, especially on the Super Bowl, you know, they want certain chips, tortilla chips, potato chips, but not kale chips. And so a bag in a 5-ounce or a 4-ounce at Whole Foods might do really well there and meet that threshold, but you might not be able to move that velocity at Costco. So you always have to be thinking about that. And a lot of times entrepreneurs aren't thinking about that. They're just thinking, oh, I'll just upsize my bag and it'll sell just as well as it does currently. And sometimes that is true, but a lot of times it's not.
I'm gonna ask you a bit of a fanboy question here. I mean, you've worked with some iconic brands like Chobani and Red, you know, the Bob's Red Mill and stuff like that. Like, what's it like working with brands at that scale? And then I mean, obviously you have a different type of way that you handle different things. But like you said, they say no and they say things like that. So talk a little bit about working with people like that.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Some people are just assholes, and that's the truth. Egomaniacs beyond. I won't mention any names, but you know, they're horrible to deal with, and I know immediately that the buyer's not going to like them, no matter how much they love themselves. We had a buyer in a category that was madly in love with himself, and he was very successful. He came from a wealthy family and was always told how smart he was. and he believed that bullshit. Buyers at Costco could not stand him. He reeked from ego when he went into the room. Some people have body odor. This person reeked from egomania. And the moment he walked into the room, he was, we used to joke around that the first thing he looked for in the buyer's meeting room was a mirror to make sure his hair was perfect. And so, and the problem with people like that, entrepreneurs like that, is they never listen in the meeting. They just don't listen to what's going on. As to where somebody like Chobani, which when people used to ask us, oh, can you make us like Chobani? And I go, no. I said, you're not Chobani, you're not Hamdi, you're not Kyle, and if I told you how they went to market and what they did, you would be blown away. Most people wouldn't take the risks that Chobani took. And everyone thought they were crazy. I used to hear all the time from buyers, oh, those guys are never going to make it. And, but they were, what a lot of people didn't understand was that Chobani was a very disciplined organization. Their goal was to get to $1 billion in 5 years in sales. And they were hyper focused. They weren't worried about what our next line of product is. They were said, when we max out this line, then we'll come out with something else. And too often brands are distracted by what we call shiny quarters. And they're always, in fact, the first thing I see, as soon as I see a whole bunch of line extensions in a new company, I know they're in failure mode. Because if the A product was working as well as they're telling everybody on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is a total bullshit factory, then what would happen is they would be so successful with that line, they wouldn't even have time to do a line extension. Now, there's many brands that over a period of time, like a Chobani, they become successful with their main line, and then they can start developing other products that fit into a portfolio. And that's the right way to do it. But when you see these chip companies, especially, come out with one puff chip and then they start doing another type of puff thing, you know the first thing ain't working. And so those are our, what we call our early warning signs. And we always make sure that the client is paying us on time, because that one won't be around long.
I'm so glad that you brought this up, and actually we are on the same page telepathically, because I was leading into innovation, and my biggest thing is that line extensions are not innovation.
Right.
And so, like, let's talk a little bit about that, and kind of from a Costco standpoint, how does Costco look at line extensions versus innovation? And if you're coming in with an innovative product, do you have to bring more data to show, kind of to support yourself, or how do you and they look at innovative products?
Well, one man or woman's innovation is another person's. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So, I remember reading, I think it was not General Mills, but it was one of the large CPGs, was doing an interview in a magazine, and they were talking about their latest innovation, which was adding probiotics to their cereals. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not innovation. Probiotics have been around for 10 years now. You guys are just figuring out probiotics. And most probiotics, if to work, have to be live, like in yogurt. And when you heat them, they die. And so you're full of shit anyway to begin with. But, innovation has to lead to sales and success. And so companies like to talk about innovation, but very few companies actually innovate. And So I'll tell you what was in my mind was an interesting innovation. His Sugar Bowl Bakery we were working with years ago, and we were looking at the market and we could see that low carb was just beginning its run. And so Costco was primarily carrying 2-pound brownies. So if you follow that mold of what a traditional bakery would do is they'll go, we'll show Costco a 3-pound brownie, you know. But my brother came up with the idea that what about if we did a brownie bite? Because if people are going to be looking for lower carbs, you get lower carbs. And a lot of people really don't know this, especially consumers, that, you know what a low carb tortilla is? It's about 2 inches less in size than the regular tortilla. That's how they get to low carb. And so we came up with the brownie bite as this idea. When we first pitched it to Costco, they thought we were friggin' nuts. Who would buy? We're selling 2-pound brownies. Who's going to buy this little brownie? I said, I bet you they eat more than 2 pounds of the brownie bite, because people are going to start saying, well, maybe I shouldn't eat 2 pounds of brownie, a 2-pound brownie. And then, so what happened was, in the end, was the brownie bite replaced the 2-pound brownie. And the turns were much faster. It became a much bigger, larger category, and consumers embraced it. And so to me, that's innovation that sells and is successful. And so, and innovation is such a overused word these days, because, it's like we added another tread to our tire. How innovative.
You ever find sometimes that like people are showcasing an innovation and it frustrates you because why was that not a fundamental thing in the beginning? Why did you hold out?
Well, it became such a buzzword that it was like the in thing to do. It was kind of like when Skechers took off, they were very popular, and then Crocs took off, and you get these fads, and so sometimes the simplest things are what work and not the innovation. And so you have to, be careful with, you can innovate yourself into becoming a niche player. Wow, we've got all these crazy, unique products, but not enough to create high velocity with just one of them or two of them.
I'm going to speak from experience that your transition and your ideas from moving to the brownie bites back when I was wrestling and things like that. I don't think my coach liked when you switched that, because I think I ate the 4 pounds instead of the 2 pounds. So from my own anecdotal experience, your innovation was very successful for the volume drive. I love that you brought that up, because it's not only that. I think of that, and then like the brownie brittles and all that stuff, and it's like that's innovation. It's like that's really, I appreciate you brought that up. And all joking aside, I am a big brownie bite consumer, so you're in good.
Yeah, I'm not anymore. Once you start getting up into your 60s, you just, there's certain things you just can't eat in the volume that you used to. It's like, I went to my cardiologist one time, and he said, well, let me just tell you something. Now that I've reviewed your entire consumption at McDonald's over the last 25 years, you consumed a lifetime of McDonald's in 25 years, you're done. He said, otherwise your heart's going to stop working. So, you have to decide, is it more important that you stop eating McDonald's in the consumption side, and you go out and start making healthier choices. And so, and I think with, the GLP-1 drugs and things like that are coming out now, you're going to see more of that, and you're going to see a real shift in the marketplace, because consumption for people that are on those drugs is going to drop. And, I have a friend, that doesn't have the discipline. So he'll sit down watching a baseball game and eat a whole bag by himself of chips from Costco. And that's just really unhealthy. And so I think over time, consumers are evolving and starting to make better decisions on what they eat. There'll always be a percentage that, no matter how many times they get cancer, they'll still smoke cigarettes. And there's people that will overeat, but it's starting to shift a bit.
Absolutely. And Costco in itself has shifted so much as far as the way the store's laid out. They've made organic and natural things so accessible to the everyday consumer that I like what you're saying from the very beginning about being principled and being full of integrity, because that showcases when you walk through the aisles there and the work that you all put in together to make those experiences the way they were. We have a few more minutes. I have two questions last for you. Is Launchpad is second to none as far as what you do, and that's a real compliment, and that's from the heart. How do you view success looking back, and was it always the same, or has your definition of success evolved over time with your career?
That's a very, very interesting question. I would say that my view of work has evolved quite a bit as I've gotten older, and I've started to realize what I've missed out on while I'm on a plane flying back east for a meeting, and the soccer games I missed and things like that. And so I'm less flexible on my personal schedule, meaning that my personal schedule with my family is more important to me now than my business is. And I think that happens for a lot of people as you get older. When you're, in your 20s and 30s and you're starting your business, or you're a gung-ho salesperson, it's really that all balls out mentality that drives you, and you have a ton of momentum. You also learn to work smarter as you get older. One of the great advantages to getting old, hopefully for most people, is you get wiser, and you begin to approach things in a different way. And I've noticed that, like with Launchpad, we, instead of going through the punishing work of, having 50, 60 employees to manage and all that other stuff, we deliberately set the company up to handle no more than 10 brokerage clients at a time during the year. And we didn't want to have a large staff. We just wanted to work with the best brands. We have a term we use for the type of brand we're looking for, which is called DUE, disruptive, unique, and exclusive. And those are things we're looking for. Like if somebody calls me on the phone and says, I want you to take me to Costco, I've got basmati rice. That's click, call somebody else. I don't want to sell the same thing. I want to bring something in that's different. And so my attitude about innovation, as we were talking about earlier, and uniqueness and disruption is different than it was 26 years ago when I started, So, and it's about people much more than about the product itself. I'll bet on a company that has a great management team, determination, and the ability to execute with a lousy product, versus someone that's got a great product but doesn't have the discipline to execute. And so all of those things have changed my life as far as what we look for in the brands we work with. Because the most finite source of anything is time. So you've got to focus on really what's important. And the idea that there's this work-life balance, I think the pandemic proved with the lockdown that that's bullshit, because people realized how much they were really missing from having a real life outside of work. And you can't have even though people are sold this idea, you can't have a balance. It should always be tilted towards your family and friends first and your business second. And find that it's much more, family is much more rewarding, I used to say, than the job is. And that's healthy. It's unhealthy when people use words like love. I love what I do. They don't understand what love is, because you shouldn't love your wife and your kids the same way you love your career. And I think that's, part of the reason the divorce rate's so high. I think that's part of the reason people are having, the suicide rate so high, is because we're sold these images that are created by marketing companies and PR firms that are impossible. It's kind of like the Cinderella story. That's not the real world. The real world is you're going to fight with your wife or your husband. They're going to be assholes sometimes. And, but we want to pretend that doesn't really exist. And then when we find out that it doesn't go exactly how we anticipate, then a lot of times people have problems coping with that. And I've unfortunately lost a lot of business friends to suicide. And if you had met these people, you would think they're the happiest people. But if you actually took the time to really talk to them, you'd realize that they were very unhappy in their lives, and so they took their lives. And so didn't mean to go this deep, but
no, you're in the right path, and it's actually a perfect closing thought, because in the reflective time and approaching retirement and looking at it, that is probably one of the most important pieces of advice that you could give anybody. It's not go make $1 million or anything like that. It's keep yourself grounded and keep yourself in a realistic place. And I think I'll be honest, a lot of people give cliche things at the end of these podcasts, and that's the reality. And I'm speaking from myself in different spots in my life. I've been in the darkest spots in the world. I've shared the stories on this before. And the fact that you brought it up you don't have to apologize one bit. I think it reiterates what you said in the beginning, that you are a man of integrity and you run a business of integrity. And that is what's important, is the foundation that you build. And I know it's going to kick us off here in a second. I'm going to say, Jeremy, that I'm going to, without bothering you on your way to retirement, I would love to have another conversation or two with you down the road.
Sure.
I've thoroughly enjoyed the past hour spending time with you.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed the time, and I've done a lot of podcasts, and I have to say I enjoyed this one immensely, because I like the format and the areas you're willing to go to and the topics you're willing to talk about. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And in closing too, remind everybody kind of how to follow what your company does. And I know, understanding that you're not a forward brand, so they might have to search a little bit. You guys are the glue that holds the brands to the retail. So kind of where they follow your business and see everything as it grows, and how your business will kind of continue with your retirement.
Well, if you want to hear about us more, I'm always posting on LinkedIn, and then of course you can go to our website and listen to podcasts and the interviews I've done. And hopefully when I get this podcast, we'll put it up on the website. And so that's pretty much it. I don't do a hard sell. Most of our business comes from referrals, and so we like it that way. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with our two Frenchies.
Excellent. Jeremy, you enjoy your day out in Oregon, and I cannot say enough how much I appreciate you taking the time today, and also taking the chance onto a podcast that I know afterwards you can look back and enjoy it, but I know for a lot of people it's nerve-wracking to get on and not have prep, not have a dinner prior or anything like that. So kudos to you for taking the chance, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Excellent. Enjoy your day, Jeremy. Take care.
You too.
If you have a story to share or you know someone with an inspiring journey, the FreeMind Podcast wants to hear from you. Submit your story or nominate somebody to be our next guest. Check out our website, thefreemindpodcast.com, and be a part of the conversation that truly matters.